The funny thing about this movie is that, of course, it came with controversy because it is about the life, sort of, and times of Donald Trump, a month before the election, second time around for him running for president. The more odd and or peculiar part might be that Trump might be showing his ass as far as immediately hating on this movie based on the director by the name of Ali Abbasi. I'm gonna botch that, but shout outs to him. He directed this thing and made it happen. Trump immediately denounced this movie, of course, because it's apparently an unauthorized biographical film, biopic as they call it nowadays. He made it clear, apparently, as I'm going to read to you right now, Trump, that is, that no one reached out to him, no one sat down to talk with him, to ask or, poke and prod about his life. So, with the following being said, this is according to Trump on, I don't think it's Twitter, I think it's the other platform they use. I forget the name of it, to be honest, not just like I don't want to approve or consent to that platform, but I don't know what the name of that thing is he uses instead of Twitter. Quote, according to Trump, his reaction to the film, quote, a fake and classless movie written about me called The Apprentice. Do they even have the right to use that name without approval? Will hopefully bomb. It's a cheap, defamatory, and politically disgusting hatchet job put out right before the 2024 presidential election to try and hurt the greatest political movement in the history of our century. And of course, his phrasing, I'm not going to say that here because I don't want to get, flagged for, mistakenly promoting that shit. He goes on to say, my former wife, Ivana, was a kind and wonderful person, and I had a great relationship with her up until the day she died. The writer of this pile of garbage, Gabe Sherman, a lowlife and talentless hack, according to Trump, who has long been widely discredited, knew that, but chose to ignore it. So sad that human scum, like the people involved in this hopefully unsuccessful enterprise, are allowed to say and do whatever they want in order to hurt a political movement which is far bigger than any of us. And of course, the phrasing and the letters are the things that I'm not going to repeat here because, again, I don't want to get flagged or misrepresented as supporting Trump. Because, again, I'm not here to support, denounce, co-sign, or maybe be like, oh, Trump isn't such a bad guy according to this film, which I think they do try to sympathize somewhat or humanize, better yet said, Trump, the ideology of Trump. Because if you are familiar, if you've kept tabs, or if you paid attention to the news or the media, how they present Trump and or basically how Trump puts himself out there, he does come off as an asshole. Let's admit that. An asshole that's utterly confident in himself to the utmost degree and extreme, which ain't even humanly possible. The only other asshole that's even sniffing close to the level of asshole that Trump is, and as much as I hate to say that about him, is Kanye West, or Ye nowadays, because, well, he's gone off the deep end. Take it from me, a fan from him, of him for the longest time, just to see the downfall. Not so much downfall. It looked like he might have had a downfall, but he's been on a come up ever since, too, bouncing back every so often, basically using the music as his excuse to have people be like, it's Kanye, we forgive him. We know his behavior already. What was his line? Like, I use my self-esteem to power my dreams, however the line goes. But yeah, that's Kanye. That's the only other asshole that I could say is almost at Trump level of asshole. Like, in the movie, they explain, apparently so, he got his attitude, demeanor, swagger, approach to life, as he's been known to have, by a guy named, I'm going to fuck it up if I don't get it right. Okay, I was going to say it right. Roy Cohn, a lawyer here in New York, that him and his dad, well, mostly Trump, him, wanted to pursue and court, per se, so that, no pun intended, they can get him to represent them in court against the Department of Justice and the NAACP, because they were being accused, of purposely denying black people the opportunity to rent in what they used to have called Trump Village, I think it was called. First time I'm hearing of it, I never paid attention to that shit, because rent is high enough already as is, and it's always been fucking high and a problem and a pain in the ass. So the last thing I'm going to do is pay attention to a man's property somewhere out in Brooklyn by the fucking ocean, where allegedly they were discriminatory against colored folks and purposely not renting out to them. But they'd rent out to all the white trash, the non-English speakers. But as long as they weren't black, allegedly, according to, what they were being accused of, it was all good, according to them. Roy Cohn is the guy they're pursuing. Well, again, at least Trump is, to represent them, because he's like he's like a pit bull. He's like a bulldog in the court. He ain't afraid of going up against the Department of Justice, the Supreme Court, and suing everybody and anybody possible just because he's got that swagger. I believe they said he was from the Bronx. So Roy Cohn is apparently the, I guess some would say, guilty party, and or most likely, appropriately put, the influence behind Trump's, again, swagger, demeanor, approach to life, and or philosophy, better yet said. So what he does with himself is he pursues this guy. He finally convinces him to be his lawyer to represent them in court. They win this shit. They start getting, taxes pardoned to be able to construct more developments, buildings, real estate, because that's how he made his fame, or his money, I guess. His dad, too. Was it Donald Trump? No, Frank? What was the dad's name? Fred Trump. And then there was Fred Trump Jr., who was the brother, of course, obviously, of Donald Trump, one of the brothers and or sisters. I forget how many there were, honestly. I didn't pay attention like that. It's a Trump flick that's kind of sort of half-assed telling his life, so forgive me for not knowing all the details or remembering like that. But there was Fred Trump, that's the dad, who was hard on all the Trump kids, including Donald and Fred Trump Jr. especially. And Fred Trump Jr. is the brother he had in real life, obviously, that died. I don't recall if the movie specifically said so, but probably alcohol poisoning or just from drinking way too much throughout his life. So, there goes that. But Dad is especially hard on Junior, Fred Trump Jr., that is, because he calls him a driver of a bus with wings, basically. So they look down upon, they frown upon, of all things, being a pilot, which, shout out to the pilots out there, drunk or not, allegedly, supposedly. You got to give them credit for being able to fly a massive thing like that, because if you've ever been in a cockpit, I haven't, but of course, according to movies and TV shows and all that, you can't even imagine the amount of stress. I couldn't imagine the amount of stress of having to know this button does that, this switch does this, in the case of emergency, do that, do this, evasive maneuvers and all that. And then you got the fact that there's something as simple as Microsoft Flight Simulator 2024 about to release too. I want to get into that, but then also apparently they have a mode where you can actually treat that shit where it's almost like a plane practically in your lap, and it kind of bugs and freaks me out at the same time because it's so complicated and perplexing and shit, as would a plane being flown is, I would imagine, I would assume. But Fred Trump Jr. gets shitted on regularly for being a pilot instead of going into the family business, which is real estate and real estate development and all that shit. Donald's the one basically bullying him as the younger brother to get into the business, but eventually he gave in and just became a pilot anyway. So defying his family, defying Dad directly, he's literally looked at as the black sheep with the black liver due to, alcohol. Too much alcohol in the fucking system, of course. And unfortunately, he dies because of it. That's apparently the reason why Trump allegedly never had a drink in his life, just from seeing his brother Fred and the damage he did to himself by drinking. Which, despite how you feel about Trump, I would say if that's true at all, like he's never ever had a drink. But then again, in the movie they show him having drinks, like, too much a drink one night and like throwing up repeatedly in a limo, outside the limo and shit. If he's never had a drink since then that's commendable. That's willpower, that's self-control, but also he had the best example possible, never wanted to drink ever, in his brother who died eventually from drinking way too much. But it's stuff like that where they try to humanize Trump and make him into somebody who really had to kind of pick himself up from the bootstraps and become a man, model himself after Roy Cohn and his approach and philosophy to life. Roy Cohn gave him 3 rules that he learned directly from Roy Cohn, being around him so much after taking him in as a lawyer, winning some cases, and just being like his right-hand guy, learning from him directly and or tapping Roy to be like, oh, can you talk to the mayor? Can you talk to the city for me and do this and do that and have him, pardon our taxes and all that shit, right? There's 3 things that the 3 rules of winning, according to Roy Cohn, which Trump then eventually, upon Roy Cohn passing because he died from AIDS, took it upon himself to be like, oh no, that's my philosophy. It's always been my approach. That's why I'm a killer. That's why I'm so successful. That's why I'm the fucking leader man in my life story. And everybody else spread across the universe is just my fucking fellow cast members and shit. On some SNL shit almost. So the 3 rules of winning, according to Roy Cohn: number 1, attack, attack, attack. As he does in the courtroom, as he does when anybody he goes up against, as a lawyer would. Attack, attack, attack. Be relentless, never stop. Rule number 2 is admit nothing and deny everything, which rings true of Trump as far as if you ask him something directly, he won't answer directly. He'll fucking just, beat around the bush, do what he has to do, say what he has to say, that, like, ultimately, and as of late, again, not because I'm a Trump fan or sympathizer or hater, nothing, but he hasn't been making a lot of sense with a lot of things that's been coming out of his mouth. But that's neither here nor there. But I guess he is living and dying by the rule as set by Roy Cohn, which, again, number 2 was admit nothing and deny everything. So admit to nothing, deny everything. That does sound like Trump. And number 3, the 3rd rule will be no matter what happens, you claim victory and never, ever admit defeat. Which, you know what? If this is what Trump took in as the only approach to life, the only philosophy to have, I will say you have to commend them at the end of the day for it. Because as, according to most, and or some, whichever side you stand on, as delusional, as self-centered, as egomaniacal, as much of an asshole as he comes off to be, there is no denying that man never, ever, ever paints himself to be weak. Which, you could say he bullied his way into the White House. He won. It was inevitable with his approach to life, his attitude and shit. And I would say that's commendable. But also, it is him taking advantage of a lot of people that bought into the act, better yet said. Like a stellar performance enough to convince them that's really that guy when, not to say he isn't, but it's a really, like, fluffed up, blown up out of proportion, not to say he's fat. Well, he is, kind of chubby in his old age. It's hard to lose weight when you get older, but he is more grandiose than he's made out to be or actually is. In the movie, again, they do their best, I believe, despite what he said on the other version of Twitter. I forget what it's called, the one that Trump is allowed on to say what he wants to say. Trump really is looked at and put on display here as somebody who has layers to him, like Shrek, on some Shrek shit. He's built like Shrek at this point in his life. That's Trump, though, when I talk about, body shaming or positivity and nothing like that. But they do their best, and I think why Donald Trump jumped out the window, per se, jumped the gun upon his initial reaction to this coming out, is he thought it would be mudslinging, a smear campaign, or just like a blemish on his track record. And again, oddly enough, this is in theaters a month before, well, when it released initially, of course, early October, a month before it comes time to elect the president and see if maybe he wins a second time around. I would say, if I was Donald Trump, honestly, if you watch this film, if you pay attention to everything they portray him to be as and or put on display, I honestly think that Trump didn't watch this at all. He just assumed the worst and immediately said denounce and or applied one of these rules that he believes in, that he learned from Roy Cohn, which is just attack the film negatively, as far as, rolling into rule number 2, admit nothing, deny everything, admit to not watching the film, deny everything about the film as far as fake news, whatever he says. And then number 3, no matter what happens, you claim victory and never admit defeat, which he is putting on full display here, those 3 rules, as far as his approach to the film. I wouldn't be surprised if it comes out eventually he didn't watch this shit, because then he can't properly judge, like he hasn't been able to in this case, and immediately attack the film for what it is. Honestly, everything that's shown in this film, listen, they put him on blast, per se, as the kids like to say today. They put him on blast and exposed the fact that, allegedly or not, I don't know how true it is, he had liposuction done, which will make sense, but then again, that's neither here nor there to point a finger at or blame him for if he did. He had liposuction, meaning they stuck a tube inside his gut and sucked out fat because he wanted his abs to pop at some point. Before that, he was on diet pills back in the 80s, which were pretty much cancer-inducing, and I can tell you firsthand because rest in peace to my aunt, my mom's sister, she died from that, from developing cancer because of diet pills she took at an early age. Well, not so early age, but back in the 80s, better get said. In the early phases of those diet pills and the trend it became afterwards, that's what she ultimately RIP'd from. So rest in peace to my aunt. They put him on display as having, I didn't even know this was a thing. The first time I'm ever seeing or hearing about it, scalp removal surgery because he was balding back in the 80s. So the funny thing is about the film too is that Sebastian Stan, who plays Donald Trump, I might as well jump on this point real quick too, does an overall pretty decent job as far as him being Trump. He don't have the voice at all to play Trump, like the intonation, but he's got the verbiage and the mannerisms down pat. So shout out to Sebastian Stan, excuse me. He's so hot, even I mispronounced his name, pause. He's a good-looking man. He's a good-looking boy. I think he's in his 40s, actually. I was surprised to see that, but plays a really good Trump as far as the mannerisms and the colloquialisms, the verbiage that Trump would use. Nailed it. Sounding like Trump? No, because there's a part early on in the film where they show Trump pulling up the Trump Village, collecting rent from all the tenants right there. And one of them is like deranged, like neurotic, whatever the fuck he's got going on. You're not real, because Trump keeps ringing his doorbell to collect the rent. So conveniently enough, he's going to go crazy that time of month. He grabs a pot of boiling water, opens the door, and tosses it at a young Trump. And Sebastian Stan, I believe, caught up in the moment trying to be an actor, as, you know, it's appropriate to do so. Got so caught up in the moment, he says, "Fuck you, you fucker." But not in the Trump voice he's supposed to put on throughout the film. He says it in his Sebastian Stan voice, like really high-pitched, all the way, "Fuck you, fucker." So it's kicking the door and shit. And then the rest of the movie, he remembers to put on like the somewhat kind of sort of Trump voice he's supposed to have, which again, that's the only downfall. The makeup is convincing enough. If you look at him quickly at a glance from certain angles, he does kind of look like Trump, at least at that age. And the hair they got on point. Like, they probably had somebody who dealt with Trump's hair at some point to work on the movie, because it looks a lot like Trump's hair. Like, you know how like wispy and kind of like hollowed out in the middle it is? It would just kind of flare everywhere. They got that down pat. So shout out to the props department for doing so, for ugly and Sebastian Stan, who actually gained some weight for the role too, because he's got titties and a gut and shit and flabby. You know, the face still pulls through as far as how good looking he is, but, you know, kudos to him to actually putting on the weight instead of putting on like a fat suit or like a faja that adds on like 20 pounds. Or prosthetics, better get said. But again, going back to the point I was trying to make earlier, is that I wouldn't be so mad if I was Trump after having watched this, because again, even though they do expose the fact, and allegedly, if he really did or not, I don't know. I'm not here to say it's true or validate it. He had liposuction done back in the 80s. He was on diet pills back in the 80s. He had scalp removal surgery back in the 80s, which again, first time ever I'm seeing that. I didn't know that was a thing, where they literally take the scalpel and cut out a piece of your scalp and sew it back together, or staple it back together. The big ass staple guns are what they used after that, because he was losing hair. So I guess less scalp, it gives the illusion of more hair, which he's always had very questionable hair to begin with. Just to touch on that briefly, side note, when I interned for Howard Stern back in 2004, towards the tail end, rolling into 2005, Trump was a guest. I'm guessing that's around the time The Apprentice was still on, and that's when Trump would be on Stern regularly, be one of his better guests, because he would just say anything. Like, if you remember, that's where he admitted, like, oh, my daughter's basically so hot, I would fuck her if she wasn't my daughter, basically. You know, that's neither here nor there. That's crazy to say about your daughter ever, whoever you the fuck you are. But when I was there, I remember clearly, and I wasn't trying to hate, I wasn't like trying to take digs at him or anything like that. I'm just an intern, I'm minding my business, and it just so happens in the room next to us in the green room is Donald Trump. Pretty popular at the moment because he's on that show, The Apprentice, he used to have, right? I have to pass by, And, you know, I have to briefly step into the green room. I did so. And I remember the lady he had with him, handling him directly, told Baba Booey or Gary Delabate, shouts to him, the lead programmer, director of the show, producer of the show, told him directly he can't wear the big ass headphones, the cans as they call them, over his head because of his hair. He needs earbuds or directly in the earpieces, or he can just go without headphones. But we're not gonna ruin the hair now because that's gonna fuck it all up basically. So back then in 2004, that was just basically confirming 20 years ago, oddly enough, fake hair. It has to be something with the hair, either a toupee, a hairpiece, or just really poorly managed hair over time that put him on blast. At least with me. I've known since then Trump's hair is absolutely fake news. But that's not we're neither here nor there to put him down like that or body shame or hair shame because, you know, again, I got no hair. As you can see clearly right there. So I'm not one to speak. I shouldn't be talking that shit about hair whatsoever. But listen, they do a lot. Like what did we just list? They put him on blast as far as being on diet pills, having liposuction done. As a man, that's kind of embarrassing. At least for back when. Now, who the fuck knows what men are doing under the scalpel with a doctor? Who gives a shit, right? Scalp removal surgery to make his hair more luscious than what it was by having less of a scalp to play off of. And also a big thing too is allegedly with his first wife Ivana, who's the only one mentioned and or portrayed in the film, Ivana Trump, allegedly he raped her at some point because of all things, as you know, it was presented in the movie. She gave him the gift of this book called Finding the G-Spot or something about the G-Spot. I guess implying that, you know, after getting her tits done, tit implants basically, they weren't fucking like that, or he didn't have any interest like that in her. So she figured, I guess, as, you know, couples would, the book would be inspiring, influential enough to help him find the G-spot on his wife. He was insulted, then he just starts going in on her, you know what, for the longest time, even though I bought those titties for you, I don't find you attractive, I find you repulsive. It's my job to kiss you or be around you whenever you're around here and shit. You know, not saying get out of here, we're getting a divorce, but basically, you know, leave me alone for the time being for as long as we're together, basically. She gets insulted by that, and she goes immediately in on him as far as saying, hey, dumbass, you're fat, you're balding, you look like an orange. She says all that, but the final line was, you're balding, and that's what set him off. Because everything else, he was just you know, flipping her off, whatever. But once she hit him with the fucking you're balding part, then as per the movie, allegedly, he lost it, struck it down, held it down on the floor, in their penthouse suite, wherever they were, flipped it over, and then proceeded to do the evil deed as far as allegedly raping her. That I would have a problem with if that was if I was Trump. I would have a problem with that part. Again, I'm gonna just blindly guess and assume he did not watch the movie, so he does not know that that's a part of the movie that would upset me or just about any man. True or not, who knows? I don't know. Do you know? No, I don't fucking know either. We could ask Ivana, but then again, even after they divorced, her being his first wife, they still had a somewhat decent relationship after the fact. They had children, obviously. Even up until when she passed, they were apparently good friends. He spoke nice of her. He spoke good things about her too. Oh, I missed her, my first wife. You know, you never forget your first one kind of thing. But it is odd to think that they put that in the film. I don't know so much to kind of, you know, we painted him to be this guy that was just overzealous or obsessed with being number one or the top dog, the big dog, the killer, as he's labeled. Finally, his dad finally owns up to him when he opens up Trump Plaza in Midtown. He's like, yeah, I was rough on you, but look what ended up happening. Now you're a killer. So it was worthwhile, right? The way I brought you up, the way I was rough on you and Freddie and all that too. Look at you now. You're the big fucking dog of the yard, right? Up until that point, yeah, they presented to be somebody just obsessed with being the guy, or adapting and adopting, better yet said, Roy Cohn's own philosophies of, you know, again, attack, deny everything, admit nothing, and no matter what you do, never admit defeat. Then they gotta put that in there. Obviously, after that, it shows that the relationship was really tough between them and or odd because of course, even though you're married, you're not supposed to be doing that stuff to your wife, taking her by force, as could better yet be said. So that would be one part. If you actually watch the movie, I would be upset too if I was him. But I get the feeling he didn't watch it at all because he just blindly went in on it saying and announcing that it fucking existed. It's a fucking smear campaign. Fuck this guy, fuck that guy, basically all that, right? What else was there? Let's see. There was that part. There was him showing almost close to no emotion about his brother's passing once he did pass from alcoholism. There's the fact that he basically pushed Roy Cohn to the side, his sensei, his master, his Yoshi to the side, left him to die alone with AIDS, let his fucking partner die before him, then he died down in Florida and embarrassed him. He gave him a birthday gift of like fake diamond, what do you call them, cufflinks, where the guy thought they were real, but then he showed them to the wife, and she said, "No, Roy, these are fucking fake. They're like zirconium, whatever, cubic zirconium, whatever you call it, right? The fake diamonds that are popular." So he's insulted. He ends up dying, I guess, because a broken heart. I made you who you are, you piece of shit. At some point, he calls him too in the middle of the street. And Trump, in return, allegedly, according to the movie, is like, "Oh, you're feeling sick there because that's when he just found out this guy had AIDS, and that's what he was dying from instead of liver cancer, as Roy Cohn was trying to pass off as having." He says, "Oh, you're feeling sick. Don't get near me. Try to feel better if you can. Ha 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 ha," kind of thing. Like really being a bully about it. But of course, those are kind of Trump tendencies as we've known him to be because the way he's made fun of, like, let's say, Rosie O'Donnell or fucking whoever else he's really been up against like that. Or again, Kamala Harris, what was it, just earlier today or something like that? There was a clip of him saying, "Oh, and Kamala was busy at a Beyonce concert, a dance party, whatever he called it." He's been known to be a bully, but I guess in his mind, you have to be the bully if you're going to make it at all in this thing called life and or get ahead in this thing called life. So can you really blame him? I guess not. But then again, there's the behavior, there's the stuff he said that really irk a lot of people. I don't approve of it either. I'm not a Trump fan, but I'm also not a Trump hater. I'm just neutral about the guy. I don't care. I don't really worry about his existence or what he does. It's just all antics. It's like it really has become pro wrestling at this point with this guy promotes himself way better than she does, and she does a bad job, and then Biden was worse, and all this shit too. So he does have a point about Biden being pathetic, let's be honest, but if you agree or not. But as far as Kamala, I think, let me not even say it, because I don't even, not that I don't know like that, but I don't care to know like that enough as far as what this side is, how that side is. It doesn't matter. So then by the end of the movie, there's a guy, I believe they said from the New York Times, that, I should have wrote this down, the name of the book. But he's the one to tap Trump to write apparently a semi-autobiography or be the writer of it while, Trump dictate to him how I grew up in my teenage years and how I became who I ultimately am right now and shit. But during that part, the guy's asking him, straight up, okay, well, tell me about your childhood. Tell me, how it was growing up with Fred Trump and everything, too. You became the man of the family, da-da-da-da-da. And, of course, in this case, Trump just denies it, or at least in the movie. He's denying. He's like, you know what, I don't like to reflect on the past. It's not worth it. It's not worth my time. Who gives a shit, really? It's past already. Let's focus on the now and the future because that's what really people want to learn about me so they can learn to be like me, et cetera, et cetera. And then he asks him, well, how did you become the way you became? Because people know you to be this whole way that you are. You had to learn from somewhere. And he just claims Roy Cohn's 3 rules of life, or how to approach life, as his own, labeling himself the killer. I've always had this killer instinct. I've always had it in me to be the way I am. And he claims the rules and says them, pretty much verbatim as Roy taught him, passes them off as his own. So really, it's just him denying the existence of Roy Cohn. As per the movie, passing everything he learned from Roy as his own, or, I did it all myself. I was my own, life coach and everything. I became what I became because of me. Thank you to me, basically, kind of thing. So to close off with also to kind of like seal the deal on that shit, because he's already got Trump Plaza, he's got Trump Tower, he's got the fucking the Taj Mahal, the shit he had in Atlantic City. He had all that, built all that, went broke. Well, not broke, but like in debt, Betty had said, because he kept building thing after thing, putting thing in development, one after the other, right? Bill collectors, people coming after him about the loans and shit, but he would still keep on building, still keep on moving, and of course, deny everything, admit nothing, and just act like he's winning all the time. Winner kind of thing, right? They close out the movie with him still talking to the guy that wants to write the book about him. I think it was The Power of the Deal was called, or something like that. They close out the film on a very close shot of Trump looking out his window. I believe it was implied to be Midtown somewhere. The camera goes directly to his eye, and from the reflection of his iris, you can see the whole fucking cityscape out there looking back at him. Basically implying it's his world and we're just living in it pretty much. That's always been his approach to things, and we're just playing by Trump's rules, if anything, as far as that's concerned. That is basically The Apprentice in a nutshell. And that's where it cuts off, because again, that's like, I'm going to say late 80s, maybe even very early 90s, like 1990 at most. You get nothing beyond that. You get no mention of when he divorced from Ivana Trump, because again, that was his first wife, and that's the only wife we learn of in the film. There was Ivana. I'm looking up the names right now. I had them right here. Okay. So Trump had 5 kids in total from 3 wives and 10 grandchildren. They only show off Ivana. And they divorced after a decade, which is technically was at least as long as marriage. I forget how long he's been married to Melania. I think since like 2000 something. So Melania's technically his longest marriage, I guess. Who's keeping tabs like that on Donald Trump's marriages, to be honest? Not me, at least. It's not my job, and I don't give a shit. But it was odd enough that this is according allegedly to who the fuck knows this happened to. It wasn't presented in the film, but Trump does cheat on his wife in the film. But in real life, apparently, the whole reason they even got divorced was because his second wife, Marla Maples, was someone he was cheating on his wife with, Ivana. And Marla went to confront Ivana about, oh, you don't love your husband because why is he fucking me like that? Crazy shit like that, right? And then, I don't think they scrapped, but it was alleged that they had like a, altercation, Betty had said, the two of them, and that led to finally them being divorced. But then she put up with Donald the first time around, and up until that point for the longest, because I think the Marla Maples marriage didn't last too long either. It was like a matter of years, and then they had the affair, they got married, and I guess, the grandioso illusion of being together finally, my wife, my hag is out the way, now we can finally be together. And then I guess when they got together, it was like, it was fun when someone else was involved. Now it's just us, it's kind of boring. Fake news, get the fuck out my fucking hotel lobby suite, whatever he's got going on. All the fucking buildings he had, right? And then, of course, he met Melania. Again, no mention, no alluding to Marla, no alluding to Melania, no nothing. And we see, I think Donald Jr., but like as an infant. So you don't really get a lot of Trump. You get like, I'd say maybe the more fascinating side of Trump, or span of life that you would want to see from Trump, as far as like when he came to power, how he came to be who he is. It is all interesting, but I would say at the end of the day, it's not the worst thing ever, as far as, oddly enough, a month before it's time to vote for presidency. Oddly enough, a month before it's time to vote for the president, this comes out about Trump's life. It wasn't bad. It wasn't terrible. It wasn't a smear campaign either. It wasn't mudslinging, or, you didn't see like, I'm Kamala Harris and I support this movie, shitting on Trump at the very end, or nothing like that either. So thank God it was none of that. I will say, though, it was an enjoyable watch, surprisingly, because the editing, top notch. It's shot pretty good. They use a lot of filters to like make it look like it's the 80s and 70s at some point, on point. And the music selection throughout, God forbid I remember the name of any of the titles, but they're not so familiar that you know them right away, but they're appropriate to the time and the era, and they were carefully selected where it's not like, you know, the Beastie Boys or fucking the regular go-tos they do when they do shit from the 80s or 90s in New York. It's great shit throughout. I gotta look up the soundtrack on Spotify, actually, see if they got that, because it was good shit. A lot of really perfectly picked cuts as far as the sounds are concerned. Again, Sebastian Stan does a pretty good job overall. Again, he doesn't nail the Trump voice at all. His voice is a little too high to play Trump, but he does get the mannerisms and the Trump vibes, energy down pat. So shout out to Sebastian Stan for doing so. The one performance I didn't like, I'll be honest, I didn't like at all, was, I forget her name in real life, but the one that played Ivana Trump. I think she actually is from that region, that part of the world, like Czech or Russian or one of those. To be honest, I forgot, so again, forgive me for that. Otherwise, the girl from the Borat movie, she puts on this accent that makes no sense, that wouldn't even sound like somebody. It sounds like a white person trying to sound like someone from over there, from Russia, Czechoslovakia, where the fuck it was. It's not good. She's pretty, and a little too pretty in comparison to Ivana in real life. No disrespect to that, of course, but yeah, that's I didn't like her so much. And then the one that steals the show, though, actually, is Jeremy Strong / Roy Cohn throughout. He's a presence. He's authoritative. He's the one that, according to the movie, taught Trump everything he knows and applied to life to become who he is right now. So yeah, that's pretty much it about the movie. If I had to give it a score, I'm going to be honest. Out of a 2, I'm going to say this gets, out of me, a 1.25 out of 2 stars, if we're going off of that system. It's not a bad watch. It's long enough. 2 hours, I believe, or just underneath that. And, God, I'm sniffling again. Oh, forgive me. Yeah, I'd say overall it was a decent watch. If you're a Trump fan, or you're all about the MAGA life, there's not too much to hate. There really isn't anything to hate at all. It's, again, not a smear campaign. It's not here to paint him in a terrible lighting or nothing. It's actually fair. I'd say it's like down the middle as far as how fair it is, surprisingly, to Trump. Showing him on the come up, his early years, and they cut it right off at the 90s where he became more of a celebrity than he was more about a tycoon, a billionaire in debt, supposedly, allegedly, all that shit, right? Not bad. Again, Sebastian Stan and Jeremy Strong make the movie very enjoyable, very watchable. Didn't love Ivana Trump, who I forget her name in real life. Overall, though, presentation, the sounds, the visuals, all that, pretty good. No complaints there. So again, I'm going to stick to 1.25 out of 2 stars for the Trump movie, The Apprentice.
Yo, it's over. All right, it's over. It's over. Move the mic. Move the mic.
Thank you.
All right.